Today on the Lunduke Hour, we've got the guy who created RedoxOS, which is an operating system built in the programming language Rust, which is A, cool, B, weird. So we're going to talk to him momentarily. But first, a couple of things to update you on. First and foremost, new camera. So it looks less crummy than before. Thank you for everyone who helped out to me to get this camera and the capture box and all that set up. We'll have to get it dialed in and cleaned up a little bit as we go, but already huge improvement, much happier. Thank you very much, everybody, especially to my Patreons over on my Patreon page, which I'm going to be very clear about this. I'm only going to do one mention or plug of my Patreon page per week so as not to be annoying as hell to everybody else. But the people who are my supporters on Patreon are the most awesome people in the world. So all the rest of the week, remember that in case you don't. Second thing, the competition I've got going on with Level 1 Tex and Wendell went crazy over the weekend and got weird. So, quick recap. Me and Wendell, we got together, two different guys, competing YouTube channels. We both set out to put Linux on something weird. Wendell did an amazing job and put two different Linux computers inside of an old 1200 baud modem case. If you haven't seen that yet, I'll put a link down in the notes. Go look at it. Praise him. Shower him with compliments because he did an amazing job on it. I tried to put Linux into a puppet and mechanize the puppet. I ended up ripping the face off the puppet, ruining the head of the puppet, needing to do all sorts of weird sewing work. So most of my time went to hot gluing and sewing, which is not something you normally do when you try and do a Linux contest. Needless to say, Wendell should win this competition and I should lose because I did a terrible, crappy job, bit off way more than I could chew, and even at that, failed more spectacularly than I could have ever possibly imagined. And Wendell did an amazing job and should be praised from here to the ends of eternity. However, because it is a competition and because Wendell and I specifically set out to have zero rules for this competition other than the community votes to decide who wins, with zero rules of any kind. There's no conditions here. I still have to try and win, so I tried to bribe everybody with a with an NVIDIA Shield tablet, gaming controller, and a pocket chip handheld, which is the same handheld that I shoved up the butt of my robot, which then in turn helped to rip the face off of the robot. So, take that for what you will. So I started bribing people with it. And if you would like to get in on that, the last chance for getting into the contest to get that little handheld Linux powered prize I'm offering is right now. Tomorrow's show will be announcing who won the contest, which better be Wendell, otherwise the universe is not a fair and just place. It should not be me. And also we'll announce who won the contest so that, who gets the handhelds and everything. Hopefully I'll have Wendell on this show. We'll try and work out the schedules. If not, we'll just announce it separately. We'll come up with something. The crazy thing here is, people started going nuts and essentially hacking this anonymous poll we set up. So we started the poll. Wendell released his video, and then I released mine about an hour later. And then Wendell's people were like, yeah, you know what? Wendell clearly did a better job. I'm going to vote for Wendell. Like 80% of the people were voting for Wendell, and 20% of the people were voting me out of pity. I think so. I think they just didn't want me to feel so bad, right? So, and then people started voting for me because of the contest. So I started gaining on Wendell. I started getting a little bit better. I'm like, good. You know what? I shouldn't win, but I want that gap to be as little as possible so I don't have to feel bad on the inside. And then someone set up a script that then voted, I think, 80,000 times for me in a row. I don't know who did that, but that was really funny because it switched in the course of like 12 hours and it went like 90% of the people were voting for Brian and like 10% for Wendell. Then the people over at Level 1 Tex, all of his fans over there on their forums and everything were like, oh, hell no. And so they jumped into it and they set up a script to even things out a little bit. And so it's been jumping back and forth like crazy. I haven't checked the last thing, but the last time I saw it was at 100-something thousand votes. The website that we set this anonymous poll on was getting slower and slower. So I don't know if that's a result of our poll having so much data in it now, or if one of our well-meaning fans was effectively denial of service attacking this poor anonymous poll website. If you are currently running those scripts, please don't do that anymore. Just in case we're accidentally taking down this poor unsuspecting website. They didn't do anything to us. We got to keep them up and running. Either way, hopefully Wendell will win the competition come tomorrow. Because if not, I don't think we have any real way of figuring out who actually won this competition at this point. There's so much garbage in the poll data. We can download the CSV for it, but it would take so much work. I think we're just going to have to declare Wendell the winner based on basic obviousness. But otherwise, we'll just wing it. All right. All that out of the way. Let's bring in a very adorable man. Jeremy Stoller, the founder of the RedoxOS project. Say hello to the entire universe, Jeremy.
Hello.
Well done. All right.
How's it going, universe?
let's start from the back and like work to the beginning here, because
absolutely
we got a lot here. I have questions coming out of my ears. Basics. What is RedoxOS? High level, elevator pitch.
Highest possible level, it's an operating system. A little bit lower than that.
Yeah, a little lower than that.
It's a microkernel-based operating system. It's written mostly in Rust, which is a new language that fixes everything according to its its lovers. But according to realists, it's a little bit like C. It's a little bit like C++. It has classes and it has organizational concepts like namespaces. But it also has this safety concept that kind of allows your code to protect from double freeze, from accidental format string mistakes and things of that nature, all kinds of memory errors. So what I've done is tried to use this technology to write a kernel that will hypothetically not crash, and which is a nice thing for a kernel to not do.
I like it.
And a bunch of drivers and programs that also share this wonderful feature. And to try and improve the quality of open source by throwing yet another operating system into the mix.
Delightful. When did you start the Redox project?
In April of 2015, by stealing time away from my wife and spending way too much on my computer. There was this program called Rust Boot that basically would get you to a hello world off of a bootloader. I had already written a bootloader before for something called Solar OS, which was a really shitty assembler operating system I wrote in my free time in college and in high school. So what I wanted to do was just see, okay, well, I booted into Rust. Let's see what we can do. So I made a graphics stack and everything was in the kernel. So it was a unikernel at that time. And it kind of grew from there. One of our users,
you put a graphics stack on it. What all did that entail at that point? At that point,
so,
not now. Like
at that point,
yeah. What was it?
Actually, about the same thing. A frame buffer that was set up by the BIOS, and I would draw some windows in that and draw a cursor and call it a day. But now, I mean, now it does pretty much the same thing. It just looks a lot nicer and things are running in user space rather than inside of the kernel.
Oh, nice. Okay. So, as it evolved. So, I mean, really, it's only been around for 2 years?
Yes.
Thereabouts? As it evolved, where has it gotten to at this point? Like, what features does RedoxOS have right now?
At this point, the kernel is mature. So, and because it's a microkernel, it has a very small amount of things it has to do.
No, wait. Kernel is mature. I don't know if you know this. There's been kernels in development for like 20, 30 plus some odd years.
I'm quite aware.
You've only been doing this for like 2 years. How is that physically possible? How is that possible?
So,
also, no one's ever heard of Rust before. You just made that language up and then started building an operating system.
I made it up. I invented everything up. But so it's a good question. I think the Herd project has been hurt by not trying to have a system call ABI that was simple, easy to use, and easy to plug into.
Yeah.
So we have this concept of just using the file-based API from Unix, just open, read, write, close, seek, and having a small translation layer on top of that called schemes. So schemes are virtual file systems that run in user space.
Okay.
And each process that needs to define, say, a network driver, it defines a network scheme. And that scheme can be plugged into by other like higher level things in the network stack. So the TCP driver plugs into the IP driver that plugs into the Ethernet driver that plugs into the network driver.
Okay.
So you can replace the network driver, you can multiplex, so you can have more than one network device. But by doing things this way, we only need about 20 different system calls. And those system calls are now fully implemented. The kernel is at a level of maturity that really the only things we'd be doing after this are any bug fixes we have to do and trying to formalize the kernel. So do formal verification on the kernel. And trying to reduce how much code we have in the kernel. Right now there's some ACPI stuff in the kernel for reboots, for shutdowns, for bringing up multiple processors. We would try to move that into user space too.
So interesting. How much code is there in the RedoxOS kernel itself? Like
in the kernel, about 10,000 lines.
That's it?
Well, it's too much because if you look at Minix 3, it's like 6,000 lines. If you look at SEL4, it's 4,000 lines. But
just to point out the difference here. I mean, I know this is a microkernel architecture and not a big monolithic kernel, but how many lines of code are in the Linux kernel? Off the top of your head.
Millions.
It's millions of lines of code. Which is bigger? Millions or like tens of thousands? I mean, that's an insane difference. I mean, that's crazy difference. And I'm glad you brought up the Herd project and not me. but the Herd has been trying to get something kind of like this going since the 80s. This is the friggin' 1980s.
That's
mean,
true.
I think the Herd project started not long after Back to the Future came out. I mean, that's kind of a big deal.
It started before Linux started.
I'm pretty confident Herd started long before you existed as a human being. And yet you came along,
a few months after Linux,
were birthed, became to maturity, and then created a new thing in like 2 years.
They can do more than Herd.
That's crazy.
At the time.
That's crazy.
So, if I could elaborate on that,
you can. I hope
the
part that's not the birthing part. You don't need to elaborate on that part.
I could.
Nope, we're good.
But we're not going to.
Yeah, we're good.
So, Herd, as you've noted, Herd took a very long time to get to where it is, and it still isn't where it's supposed to be. And what it has done is it has basically destroyed the viability of microkernels for an entire generation. People my age and people your age and people in between. And pretty much everyone from when they heard about Herd to now thinks microkernels are a joke and are something that should not be explored.
Yeah.
And that is mostly because of Herd. Because people saw, well, okay, this is the greatest example of a Unix-like microkernel, and it's not mature, and there hasn't been.
The only other one I can really think of that actually shipped and got to maturity was on the OS X side with Mach, and then the services on top of that, and that's kind of almost more of a hybrid sort of a thing. So
it's a severe hybrid. So Mach 3, they took Mach 3, they moved it into XNU, and they added a bunch of kernel space drivers to it and loadable modules. So it right now, if you look at it, it looks a lot more like FreeBSD and like Linux than it does like Mach.
So okay,
and
let's take a step back here, because I think this is going to be for a lot of people their first exposure to Redox. So all right, so microkernel, small microkernel. Even though you want to make it smaller, it's already really small in comparison to most other things out there. Certainly most functional things. So let's walk through what the system itself is capable of at this point. So if the microkernel itself, the kernel is small, most things are operating out of user space. What can you do in that user space right now? Like what's physically possible?
A user downloads the ISO. they boot it up, what they'll experience is there's a networking stack, there's a graphics stack, we have themes, it looks nice, which is something I've been working on for the past month. There is no audio yet, but it won't be difficult to do that. And one of the older kernels had audio support. There's file system support. We have a new file system called TFS that acts a lot like ZFS, but it's all written in Rust and has some advantages over ZFS. So at this point, the user will get the experience they expect if they boot it up in a virtual machine.
Okay.
I'd say what's lacking right now is support of hardware that you'll find in the real world. So we support Intel Ethernet devices. I'm going to be working on Wi-Fi support at some point for Intel Wi-Fi. The way we do graphics is through a frame buffer set up by the bootloader. So
Sure.
If we want to have hardware acceleration, which isn't necessary right now, but will be.
Will be at some point. You got to have 3D acceleration at some point, just for kicks and giggles, if nothing else.
We're probably going to look at Mesa and try to port it. So don't expect very good NVIDIA support, but do expect very good Intel graphics support.
Nice.
Sometime soon.
So what sort of applications exist within Redox right now? Like what can you run? So you've got it in a virtual machine, you're connected to your network, you can get out online. What can you do?
So we have a package manager. We have a pretty mature command line ecosystem. And we have, in the graphical side of things, we have a very crappy browser I wrote.
From the command line, is it new applications written in Rust or stuff you've ported over from the Linux or FreeBSD or something side?
It is all Rust. So we have support for everything is Rust.
Everything is Rust. So not just the kernel is Rust and the system is Rust. Every application running is Rust.
Everywhere is Rust. Yes.
Really?
Everything.
That's crazy. I mean, in a good way. That's the good kind of crazy. I mean, that's a huge undertaking, though. I mean,
the Redox project covers not just the kernel, but the entire operating system, and everything there is Rust by default. But that doesn't mean we don't support C. We are able to port C, and we could port the core utils from GNU. But we have our own core utils that function very similarly and should be, in most cases, compatible.
Really?
With the core utils and other Unixes.
That's way awesome.
So the command line, pretty much, it has either it has it has every program you expect, or it has someone who knows that there's a missing program or a missing flag on a program. Our package manager exists, but we don't have a lot of packages, for example.
Yeah. And a crappy
for
browser.
The graphical stuff,
you wrote
a very crappy browser that I wrote. A text editor. I just implemented resizing support in the GUI, so that will have to filter through the applications. We have a terminal emulator that's written in Rust, and by the way, all of these things run on Linux too. So if it runs on Redox and it's one of our user space things that's not a driver, like the browser, all of the graphics stack, all of the command line utilities, they all run on Linux and on OS X and even on Windows. So part of our goal has been to support every Rust supported operating system with our own programs.
Interesting.
So you don't have to replace your kernel to get the Redox project. You just have to utilize pieces of the Redox project.
So if someone wants to get involved in the project and contribute to it, they can do so from any operating system, really.
Yeah, that's right.
That's kind of cool.
So most of what I do is to develop something on Linux and then put it into Redox and see what happens. Because Redox is not self-hosted yet. It needs we need to port the Rust compiler, which we've ported GCC, but the Rust compiler is the most complicated piece of software in the entire Rust ecosystem.
No, wait. When you say you've ported GCC, does that mean you've rewritten GCC in Rust?
No. That means that you can compile GCC for Redox.
Okay. Gotcha.
Although this is an interesting project to write a C compiler in Rust.
Right. That's what I was
but
wondering. I was like,
not sure what the
say
point.
what?
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be cool.
This is fascinating. Do you have any idea around like benchmarking, like how much memory the kernel and the networking stack and the basic GUI and all that takes up at this point?
Absolutely. At this point, if you run from the live disk, you'll use about 400 megabytes of memory. And the reason for that is that running from the live disk, the entire virtual file system is loaded into memory.
Oh,
and
so it loads literally everything.
Yeah. So when you're running off of an installed system, it can be about 200 megabytes.
Okay.
And the majority of that is actually frame buffers for the graphics stack for virtual. So
so what if without the frame buffers? What if we took that out of it? Where do you have any idea where it would be at that point? Like,
gosh, maybe 128 megabytes. I could find out if I ran it without. Yeah, it's the load is mostly the kernel pre-allocates some things to improve speed, and if we didn't pre-allocate, then so one of the things about Redux, it's designed to run on x86 64. It's not designed for older architectures, so we have an expectation that there will be memory there, so we pre-allocate.
So you might as well take advantage of what you got. It's not built to run on old crusty machines like what I tend to run. Gotcha.
It will run fine on your XPS 13. It will run beautifully.
And I'm assuming it would also run well on the majority of System 76 machines, which is where you work.
That is correct. It will run well on most of them, except for the NVIDIA drivers, which are going to be an issue.
Which are going to be an issue,
yeah. NVIDIA, hopefully, let's hope AMD does something really good, and System 76 will be there to look at it and to investigate, because we really love open source and we really want open source graphics.
I concur.
Because without open source graphics, things can be quite a shit show for small operating system people like myself.
Quite the shit show, to be sure. Two interesting, totally unrelated to Redux things I would just like to point out to people. So you're sitting in the System 76 offices right now.
That's correct.
One of the other people that you work with also is one of the kind of main guys and the user experience guy over on the elementary project.
That's right, Cassidy.
I find that fascinating that there's a medium-sized company out in Denver that employs, and now there's people sticking their heads out behind there. There's that employs people that are building kind of alternative systems beyond what System 76 even ships with, and I think that's just really, really cool. That's neat that's happening there. It seems, I mean, considering how many people work at System 76, it seems like an unusually large percentage of you are building systems that are fairly ragtag.
There are 19 people here, and every engineer we have has open source projects they work on.
That's cool.
We love open source. The entire purpose of the company is to push open source forward with good hardware.
That's awesome.
I'm a kernel engineer employed at System 76, which means I actually work on 2 kernels. I have a lot of experience with Linux. I write drivers for Linux, and a lot of that came into Redux. My understanding of Linux, my understanding of FreeBSD, my understanding of Minix 3, which is another microkernel that can get up to a GUI. Those
Tenenbaums.
Thank God Tenenbaum exists, but I did throw out a lot of stuff he did on Minix 3. At the end of the day, it was, can we make a microkernel that actually does something that people want, rather than can we make a microkernel that is a research project for 20 years? I don't want that.
Where do you go with this? I mean, okay, so I mean, clearly it's a young project, right? I mean, you don't have a 3D stack. You don't have audio going currently. I mean, there's obviously stuff to do, right? But you've come a long way in 2 years. What's the roadmap look like for you? Like, realistically, looking at where you've come in the last year to 2 years, where are you going in the next couple of years? And what's your goal? What's your end game here?
Well, the sky's the limit, because what I've done is designed a kernel where, audio's not there, but I can see it not being difficult to do.
Sure.
I can see the future holds, we get audio, we get wireless support, And
I
even
gotta stop
before
you for a
that,
second. I gotta stop you for a second.
yeah,
It's interesting. Normally, if most people come on the show and they say, "Yeah, we can implement audio from scratch over here on our system. It's gonna be no problem. We're gonna do it," I would immediately call bullcrap on them and say, "Have you seen Pulse Audio? Have you seen ALSA? Have you seen Jack? And seen what a horrible
yes,
nightmare it's been?" And yet, on the
yeah,
flip side, you have gotten in 2 years, really less than that, a whole hell of a lot accomplished. I kind of,
yeah.
it's weird. Like, if you were anyone else, I'd probably call baloney, but I'm kind of inclined to say if you can continue at your current rate, yeah, audio might not be that big of a
No, it
problem.
will happen. It will happen because we had it before. We had audio before. It was implemented in the kernel because, so one of the history points is we started with a much larger kernel,
Sure.
and it was 32-bit. So one of the learning points was to rewrite the whole kernel, and it took 2 months. We rewrote, mostly me, actually only me. I rewrote the whole kernel
So
because
the royal
it
we,
took
yeah.
2 months of just staring at a screen, one person, to clean out the whole thing and re-implement it from scratch. And through that process, what we have now, I mean, network drivers and the way that those work and the way the disk drivers work, it doesn't scare me to re-implement audio. I already did it before. I'm going to bring USB support back, which we had before. And these things just need to be done in user space. And I've read through the specs. I know a lot about ALSA. I write patches for ALSA for some of our System 76 hardware. Yeah, I think what misses in other operating systems is an understanding of Linux and the other kernels. People just want to jump in and do things their own way without learning from the past. So learning from the past means saying, okay, the Linux stack for audio still sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
We still have problems. So we need to ask the question, why does OS X have a better audio stack? Why does Windows have a better audio stack? Why is it easier to do things there? Why is it that even now, we still have to, when we open up Skype, go into the settings and, oh, damn, it didn't select the right microphone,
Right.
and
Yeah.
do all this.
Yeah. Yeah, every time I do one of these shows, even though it's the exact same setup every time, I got to go in and twiddle at least one or two of the settings.
Yeah.
Because it forgets and gets stupid.
And you're running several different sources.
Yeah.
And, running multiple sources at the same time is something that's very difficult in a lot of the Linux audio frameworks.
It really is.
For no reason at all. The hardware underneath supports collection from multiple sources.
You hear that, Leonard Pottering?
And
I know you're watching this right now. It shouldn't be hard. You did this
It
to
shouldn't
me.
be.
You. All right.
And maybe, just maybe, Brian, while I'm working on the audio stack for Redox, and while I'm finding other people to help me with that, we can move that work into Linux as well.
That would be awesome. I mean, why not, right? If the Rust stuff works in
Yeah.
user space and you can build it in user space, then theoretically you could port it over to Linux. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Huh. So when you imagine this, say 5 years from now, do you imagine this more as an embedded sort of system, a desktop system, a server system?
Yeah.
What do you see this as?
Not embedded. This is designed for powerful architectures, x86, 64. There's no reason the kernel couldn't be used in an embedded sense, but I'm personally not going that route.
Okay.
So we do have some other people who are interested in that, and I would support them fully. I'm interested in the server market and in desktops.
Okay.
And what I'm interested in is to deploy a server system that will have very few vulnerabilities and will have provable security to some extent. So there's no reason that in this day and age, again, I'm going to use that phrase, that we should be fearful about running a web server. There's no reason at all. There's no reason that we should spin something up and expect it to come down at some point. There's no reason we should spin something up and be afraid of upgrades. So a lot of these things need to be built into the software at a lower level. And so that's part of what's going into the file system is fearless upgrades. Being able to roll back without any fear, being able to migrate very easily between two versions of a package. So we can do that with package file systems.
Sure.
And we can do that with snapshots on those package file systems. So we can do this by implementing things at a lower level that have not been allowed by simply following what Unix 7 did. Which, if you know the history of Linux,
yeah,
and FreeBSD and the other BSDs, you know that we're pretty much sitting on and it's not even Unix 7. We're sitting on Unix 5.
It's mostly 5. Yeah, really.
And
see, when did 5 kind of really come out? That was, I believe that was 1776. I think that was the year that Unix 5 came out.
1776, the same day that System 76 was invented.
Yeah, System 76, Unix 5, and America.
Yeah.
Those are the things that happened.
And America all at the same time.
That was a big year
God
for everybody.
Freedom in that.
Yeah, go team. So this is here's the thing. So I look around and I don't want to classify this as an alternative operating system project, but it kind of is. You know what I mean? It's not mainstream. It's ragtag group of people, or in many cases a dude, just cranking out something that's kind of cool, which I think is awesome and killer. And I think there should be more of that sort of thing happening. But I look around at projects like Linux, like Herd, or like the Haiku project, or there's just so many operating systems out there that have really strong points, that are excellent systems, but that have struggled to make significant advancements even in those early phases, those early stage things, those kernel level things to build from. And then you come along and you've got clearly a mountain of work ahead of you to have a big fully functional desktop system that someone like me is going to look at and go, yep, I'm clearly going to be using that to record my next thing or as my laptop system or something. But the underlying core happened fast. I mean, really fast especially when you compare it to all the other systems, some of which have been, like we said, in development since the friggin' 1980s. And that absolutely blows my mind a little bit. Is that because of Rust? Is that because of the design approach that regardless of the language? Or are you some sort of an alien guy who just happens to be bringing in some sort of advanced robo-technology?
Well, it's all three. And I have spoken
it's a good answer.
with the Oracle, and I know the no.
Whoa! Yeah, we're not going mystical here. We're going just strictly aliens, not mystics. Yeah. Let's be clear here.
It was an alien oracle.
Oh,
a little bit
mystical. Alien oracles are cool. Yeah, because alien.
I want to go back a little bit further.
Yeah, go back.
No, you're not going to use desktop Redox anytime soon. But what you will use, in my opinion, is some pieces from Redox that get you benefit. I think you will see packages from Redox in the larger Linux ecosystem available in package managers, replacements for things that currently exist, because they're simply done with more care than what we see out there today. A lot of my problems with C and with the way that a lot of open source is maintained, is the amount of carelessness in the ecosystem. And being a Ubuntu maintainer of sorts and having to ship Ubuntu on our System 76 machines really does enlighten me to just how many projects are left behind and dead and their maintainers are gone. And we wonder, how did it become this way? There are projects with open bugs that have no maintainers. And we wonder, what do we do to fix this issue? Well, one way is to inject a new language into the conversation.
You mean like
inject
Java?
Rust into the.
Why not Java?
Rust is compiled, and Rust is a lot like C, and Rust protects you from the mistakes that you can make easily in C. I'd say those are the reasons why
those are pretty fair reasons.
Makes things go so quickly.
And just to be clear to anyone listening, straightforward, the Java thing was a joke. Don't misattribute me as being some Java lover. Oh, don't start, man. Don't start.
Let's talk about Android. The fact that the biggest distribution of Linux out there
is basically
uses
a
a
giant
majority of
Android
Java.
virtual machine. Yeah, it's
Java didn't lose. It just Oracle didn't make any money off of it, is what it was, and they sued for that reason.
Okay. All right. So but Redux. So how long? All right. Just because I'm kind of interested in how you're thinking about this. So
Yeah.
before I started doing whatever the hell it is I do now for a living, I was a dev manager, right? I was a developer, and then I managed teams of developers, usually on games. So it's a little different than like building an OS project, or a lot different than building an OS project, but
Right.
same basic idea. So I have in my mind, knowing what you've accomplished so far, like what I would expect to see in terms of future outputs, and I can already think about what the pitfalls are going to be. What do you think, realistically, if you're envisioning your future of Redux as a usable desktop for you, not necessarily for the mass populace, but for you personally, how long do you think it'll take you to get there? At your current rate of progress, assuming that your significant other at home doesn't throw you out for spending too much time on Redux, how long do you think?
Well,
It's a hard question.
adding that assumption makes it a lot harder.
Yeah.
So if my wife doesn't throw me out,
Maybe if your wife throws you out, you'll
usable
have
desktop-
more time to work on it. So maybe
So
that would help. Yeah.
that's right. Well, if I'm going to use it on real hardware every day, I think the best thing possible would be to have self-hosting where I can compile Redux on Redux.
That's a big deal.
And I'd say we're about a year from that, because that requires a significant amount of work with the Rust team, which I've been in contact with this whole time, and I've been making patches to Rust 2 to support Redux. Like, if you look, I'm one of the top 10 contributors to Rust as well. One of the pitfalls of this project is we don't have that many contributors.
Sure.
I do a lot of the legwork, and so one of the great contributors is Tiki, and another one is Stick, who's been doing a lot of the shell work and making our completely Rust shell a true competitor to Bash. But
That's
what
awesome
I
that
need
you guys are writing it from
to
all
run it on
Rust,
my own
by the way.
computer?
That's amazing. Yeah. So self-hosting
I
in
need
about
Rust
a year.
C. Yeah, I need self-hosting.
You need self-hosting. So in about a year, you could run it as your own machine, at least for developing Rust.
Yeah.
How about in your day-to-day? Because, I mean, right now we're sitting here doing a video conference, and that's a lot of functionality that has to be built. It's a lot of functioning that has to be ported over, especially if you're sticking to the Rust and only Rust way forward. Like, does that mean like an HTML renderer needs to be entirely written in Rust in order to bring that over? Like, how purist are you going to stick in order to get to that fully functional point?
I'm not an absolute purist, and I'm happy to package C if it's the thing that works, but luckily we don't have to in this case. Servo exists, and Servo is getting to the point where I believe you could actually run a video conference.
What is
in
Servo?
Servo is a Rust web browser. It does still have some C. It uses SpiderMonkey as the JavaScript engine. So it's being developed by Mozilla, and they are serious about it. They are using some of the components from Servo in Firefox right now. So I'm not actually using Firefox. Don't tell anybody that. I'm using Chrome. So for me, it will be a little bit harder because I do have to port Chromium. But in general, I think having Servo will take porting Mesa so that we have good 3D acceleration.
That's a lot of work.
And,
I mean, it's not nothing.
And I think it would also build on self-hosting as well. So I think we need self-hosting, and I think we need Mesa. Let's put it out there at 2 years. I really, but let's think about what do we want to use Redux for today?
Yeah.
If we were going to use it today, I think as a server operating system or as a virtualized system, it's already usable.
Really?
And I think that, if you want to run a web browser, not a web browser,
a web server,
a web server, then, well, you can run my shitty web browser. But it's text only.
Yeah, hey, I'm a text only kind of guy, so you know me. What kind of web serving capabilities does RedoxOS have at this point?
It can run a lot of the web frameworks that are written in Rust. It can run Iron. It can run Hyper.
Good point. I didn't even really think of that. Normally when I think of web frameworks, I don't think of Rust. Perhaps that's a mistake, but yeah, I completely skipped my mind that that's even a thing. So
I'm not even sure I need to write that much more software. I think what we really need as a Rust community is more interaction with the bigger open source community to make people aware, we already have these things. If you want to try them out and use them, in a lot of cases, they're more secure than their C counterparts. And in other cases, they need a little bit of work. And if you want to help out, everything is free license. I have not seen a proprietary Rust project.
Interesting.
So Richard Stallman's dream is coming alive with Rust, perhaps.
You haven't seen any proprietary Rust project at this point?
I have not seen a single one. And that's part of that is that there hasn't been a market movement to hire Rust developers and to do Rust development.
Yeah. So that is part of it, but
that's
still,
part of it.
But still,
that isn't it.
So yeah. Even
in all my experience, hundreds of different Rust projects, not a single. They're usually MIT or GPL.
Yeah.
Or Apache.
Fascinating. So, the thing that gets me about this, I've never done a project in Rust. Never have. I just haven't. I got out of software development predominantly a couple of years back and just haven't gone the Rust route. Though I do hate C with a burning passion. I just hate it. I absolutely hate it. I loved it at one point, but then after about 3,000 projects in C, I kind of want it to die a Bernie death. You want to shove it in the oven and just be like, I'm done with you. And yeah, you know what? C people flame me for that one. I can't stand it anymore. I'd rather write everything in Pascal than write it in C, which is saying a lot because I don't really like Pascal all that much. Sorry, Pascal people. I'll just insult every developer today.
We're just building up the hate.
Yeah, who
Java
else
got some hate too.
Well, now Java, come on. No one loves Java. Let's be honest.
No one loves Java, but they get paid for Java.
Yeah, you get paid for it, so you do it. And at best, you don't hate it a ton. like it could be worse. But yeah, all right. At least it's not Objective-C. So.
Oh.
So the interesting thing here to me is, and Rust itself hasn't gotten a lot of press. Not really. A little bit, but not a ton. But now, as a proof of concept of you can build an entire system in a particular language, Redux is kind of a critical thing for the Rust ecosystem, just because it proves that it's doable. You can build that, and it's scalable, and it works well for that. And that's kind of a big deal, even if, God forbid, the RedoxOS project dies a horrible death and it just crashes and burns and you're like, I'm done with this. I'm not building OSs anymore. The fact that you got to where you've gotten right now is kind of a major testament to Rust's viability as a system for building large, complex systems. That's impressive.
Yeah. I'd say there are two projects that really needed to be there. Servo, which is the web browser project, and Redux. And what Redux started as was, this is a cool language. I want to see what I can do with it. And at this point, it's growing and growing and growing to where the answer, I want to see what I can do with it, doesn't seem to have any boundaries. It seems like this language can do everything C did. And we can use it as a base for whatever we want to do, whatever we want to accomplish as an open source community. And awesome. Hopefully what we want to accomplish is to have better software that makes people happier and that has fewer bugs and fewer vulnerabilities.
That's kind of a good thing. I'm not opposed to anything that you just said. Also, I'm kind of thinking that maybe the people over on the Herd project just need to hop on board with Redux and help get you up and going. You know what I mean?
Well, they might be mad about the licensing. But I'm open to GPL if it brings on
what's your licensing right now?
Most of them are MIT.
Okay. And but you'd be open. So if the herd
I don't
people,
care about licensing at all.
okay,
I don't.
all right, so
So long as it's free software,
okay,
and so long as that means the several freedoms for myself. I can change the source. I can rebuild it and redistribute it.
yep,
And
critical.
if I can do those things,
You're happy.
then I'm happy.
So if the herd folks were like, you know what, we come on board if it's GPL, son, and you'd be like, shoot, dog.
I'll consider it. Yeah. So long as it doesn't lose other contributors who are important.
Okay.
So all based on, I personally don't care so long as I have freedom. It is my project, and I will have the final say on which license. But also another thing, I've modularized everything. So drivers are modular. The kernel is modular.
Oh.
Each one is its own licensing domain.
So
if you want to contribute a driver, or you want to contribute a file system or some service or anything,
you can
do it under your license, the one that you like. Accept it, so long as it meets our quality for the source.
That's kind of an interesting point, because I mean, on the Linux side of things, we have a much more monolithic kernel stack, which means that licensing really has to be very strictly compatible. On your side, theoretically, someone could come along and even develop a proprietary audio user space driver. You may not ship with it, but
NVIDIA,
they can make
come
it.
Help me out. Yeah.
Huh. NVIDIA could come help you out.
Package managed drivers too, which is another advantage. They're just processes running in user space.
So why not?
So just like everything else.
Yeah.
So they can have different licenses. They can be packaged. They can have dependencies. All of that.
I love that, by the way. That is fantastic. I've always been a really big fan of just the highly modular systems like that. Like HaikuOS does that, and I really like the way they do that. The system itself, the core system is fairly small, and then it just loads up a whole bunch of individual basically like little mini daemons that spin up that handle the sound.
I love Haiku. It's admirable what they're doing. And when I heard about their package management, I think that's the right route for us to go to have file systems for each package that can be mounted in, mounted out.
It makes sense. It's very logical. It makes sense. For anyone who's wondering what we're talking about, I did an interview with one of the Haiku developers a while back. Go look at my back catalog and find that. It's really, really fascinating and really a lot of similarities with what you're doing. This guy started, I think, in high school working on HaikuOS, and they really just kind of like, well, let's see what we can do and let's push it forward. And they've built a system. They weren't really starting completely from scratch, but kind of, sort of. But they've come a long way in the time they've come. But honestly, I mean, the speed that you've come along, I'm very excited to see where this is in a year to 2 years, because this is kind of cool. This is very, very cool. I remember when I was in, so I was in high school. Me and a friend, we decided we wanted to do our own operating system project. And this was back in the 90s. And so, of course, I was running DOS at the time. I was actually running OS2. It was OS2 Warp 2 or Warp 3. But essentially, we were developing it in DOS. And we used MASM, the old Microsoft assembler compiler.
Oh, God.
And we bootstrapped it so it booted on an old 386s and 486s, and it booted up. We got it running so it could read a real basic file system. We had a couple of Hello World programs that were essentially our version of a command line environment, and then we stopped at that point. But it was so exciting to be able to build your own operating system, as pointless as my endeavor was. And the fact that you've gotten it to the point where you have your frame buffer up and rocking, you've got a microkernel architecture, which I never did. This was just basically a garbage re-implementation of like CPM is basically what I wrote that no one should ever have used. And it's a fascinating endeavor, and I love to see it when the projects actually continue. Like, you didn't start this out and a few months later abandon ship and be like, well, I did it, that's wicked cool, and then move on to something else. I really hope you continue with this, man. I hope people actually jump on board and help out. What do you need? Like, if you're looking out there ideally right now for people coming on board and helping out with things, what is the biggest needs for developers and writers and testers or whatever? What do you need? What do you need help with?
Well, I'd say what I need and what Rust needs in general is a better way for new users to get into it, because I think that would solve everything. I think among the Rust community, we have a lot of contributors, but the Rust community itself is very small.
Yeah.
And when I look at the JavaScript community, I see a language that people just dislike for
because it's horrifying. It's a horrible language.
But
wow. Is there any
so
language
many
I'm not
people-
going to say about? I'm a pretty big fan of Quick Basic. That's the one I'm going to get behind. Quick Basic 4.5. That's the one I'm going to support right now.
The first language I learned was Visual Basic, and the second I learned was NASM, syntax for assembly.
Did you really? Do you remember which version of Visual Basic did you get started on?
6.
Okay. See, I was kind of I was out before then. There was a version of Visual Basic for DOS that I cut my teeth on. I don't even remember when that was, man. They released one version of it, and like 8 people in the entire world cared about it. And it was literally like a visual like layout tool entirely in DOS that you could build UIs in ASCII art. It was killer that you could do that. Nothing about it was good other than that. That was the only cool part.
That's all I did was build modals and build forms. And I loved it.
It was fun.
Because I thought that's how you programmed at the time. But then the more I learned,
right.
And then probably the third language I learned was C.
Yeah.
And I still have to know C a lot. But one of the good things about Rust is it closes the loop on C too. So your C code ends up being higher quality because you've learned things from the borrow checker in Rust that come back to your C code and influence how you do things. And I think if we could convince more people to use Rust and try Rust, it would just help the open source community in general. It would help Redox. It would help a whole bunch it would help human progress move forward.
That is a grand statement
like
for a programming language.
If you want to see Star Trek happen in real life,
we need Rust.
Gotta learn Rust.
Why not Smalltalk, man? Smalltalk's pretty bitching. I like Smalltalk. What do you have against COBOL? COBOL's righteous, man. That's just been running forever, son. No.
Yeah,
COBOL?
COBOL has the highest uptime of anything out there. So.
Right. And you gotta have high uptime if you want to get all Star Trekky on this.
Oh yeah.
All right. So. Where do people go? What do they need to check out? What's the website? Give me all the stats, man.
I guess start at rustlang.org, but this is the issue that I think exists. There's not really a good place to jump into things. And I think if we as a community could make it easier to jump into things, to really provide a landing point for all the what I want to do is grab all the JavaScript developers and teach them that web programming isn't the only thing out there. We need system programming.
Oh, heavens, yes. You're speaking my language right now, man.
Programming.
Oh, man. You hear that, all my web developer friends? You need to branch out, son. You just got to do it.
So we need to learn from the JavaScript community, Node.js, and all of these frameworks that exist out there. I found it so easy to jump into Bootstrap. I don't know why we can't have documentation like that for every Rust project. We can't build a better community that really reaches out to new people. And that would help a lot. Because my major issue is contributors and users. Both of those numbers are really low.
Okay.
We had 1,000 downloads of the newest ISO. I think that's good.
That is good, man. For a hobbyist OS at this point, 1,000 downloads ain't nothing, son.
For a hobbyist OS at this point.
I mean, realistically.
Ubuntu gets that many downloads a day.
Yeah,
so
we don't count that. But I mean, like, look at it this way. FreeDOS. FreeDOS just had a release back in Christmas Day. They had a release on December 25th. In the first month, they had 100,000 downloads. That's big, right? I mean, that's a lot for a new free version of DOS. But that's an established system that's been around for longer than any other DOS has ever existed. And it got 100,000 downloads. Yeah, you may have only got 1,000, but that's
Oh, I'm satisfied with that
that
growth.
that means that
It's
you're
a lot more than
talking
before.
1% of DOS, man. That's already feeling pretty good, and
Yeah.
that's a good step.
I want to see, because I can write code. I just I want more users, and I want more people to write code with me. This project isn't going to die if that doesn't happen,
But it'll
but
make it
that's
go
what I'd
faster.
like.
It make things go faster. Yeah. So okay. So if people want to be involved in Redox specifically, where do they go? Who do they talk to? Is there a process?
Redox-os.org. Send me an email.
Redox-os.org.
Info at, that's info at redox-os.org.
Okay.
I will read every one of those, and I will invite you to the chat if
Don't
you
say
ask.
that, man. You
No,
never know what
I will
happens.
read every one of those. If it's 100,000 emails,
It might take a
then
while. Yeah.
I will probably, yeah, Redux will be stable before I read all of your emails if it's 100,000 emails. So,
Oh man.
but send me an email. Go to our GitHub page. That's github.com/redox-os, and check things out. We have releases. Download one. Try it in VirtualBox. Try it in Kemu if you use that. Tell us what goes wrong.
Yeah. Awesome.
We're out there, and we just need more users to interact with us. That's all.
That's awesome, man. Oh, well done, and congratulations on getting this far, because that's pretty rad.
Thanks.
Before we go, I want to make one additional point about the spot where you're sitting and the company that you're working in, because I think that this is very entertaining to me. Right now, you're sitting in your CEO's
Do you want to go on a
office,
tour?
of System 76?
We can.
Yeah,
sure.
Take me on a tour. One of the things that I love about this is I've had 2 people from System 76 on the show in the last month or so. In both cases, both of you have the biggest potty mouths of any other guest I've had on the show, which I think says wonderful things about the company. All right, what are we looking at
this
here?
This is Cassidy over here.
There we go.
You may remember him
from Elementary OS.
This is Ben.
Hi, Ben.
I can't hear you at all.
I don't want them to hear me.
Yeah. This is Luisa, our marketing manager.
Hello.
This is Ryan. He was also on the show.
He was on the show, and he was sweary on my show. I remember that. It was wonderful.
This is our very shy graphic designer, Kate.
Hello.
This is our even shyer engineer. He is my counterpart, David.
Fantastical. And there's your testing lab set up. That's fantastic.
This is Ian. He is our R&D boss.
I know that guy.
At this point. Technically not the boss. Not the boss, but he is a boss.
He's pretty boss. He seems boss. He's got a boss hat on, and that's something.
This is Sarah, who is my boss.
Yeah. Fantastic.
This is an OpenSUSE lizard.
Very nice lizard. What is that? It's a chameleon, son. Is a chameleon technically a lizard?
Here's the shyest person in our company and the most elusive, and I stole his office.
Hey, Brian.
Hi there, Carl.
Our underappreciated support team. They make the company run. They are the reason why we sell computers.
Hi, Brian.
That's fantastical.
I can't hear you, but it's good
This
to
is
see you
April.
again.
This is James.
Guys.
Hey, Brian. Nice to see you.
You have a cool crew, man.
We
You
have a
an
very
awesome
cool crew.
Awesome crew. Awesome crew. All right.
And this is what happened today, apparently.
I don't know. What is all that? Are those rose petals?
Those are rose petals, yes,
Wow,
leading to my desk.
There's a lot of love going on right now. That is a lot.
There is a lot of love. Yeah.
That's tons of love. Well, that was awesome.
Ah,
I didn't even know we were gonna get to do a total awesome virtual tour of System 76 today. But why the hell
now
not?
everyone else can see that, and you were here for the Superfan event.
I was. That was a lot of fun. I'm glad I
And
got to be out there for that.
You
That was
stole
great.
your phone and prevented this kind of experience from happening then. But we will be releasing a video soon of that. So
Oh,
fingers
really?
crossed, I'm in it as a penguin. And
Fantastic. Is there video of me in the monk robe you guys put me in?
there is
Probably.
definitely video of you.
Oh dear.
And if there's not video of you, I will have to make some.
And just to be clear, people watching at home, yeah. So I went out to System 76 for about about a day and a half, and they dressed me up. We did like a role playing thing, and they dressed me up like a monk. I think I was a monk warrior. No, I was a monk priest.
Yes.
I don't remember. They even had me make like a character sheet for it. It was ridiculous and tons of fun all at the same time. All right, Ryan, you're awesome. You're an awesome dude. Thank you for doing what you do, man. And hopefully you get a little more help on Redox so it can go even faster, because I'm anxious to see where this goes, man. I think this would be rad. And
well, we'll see.
You know, and again, I know it sounds crazy, but I'm looking out there at Herd, and I'm like, man, there needs to be some kind of a cohesive synergy going on here, because you're making significant progress in areas that other projects haven't, and you could benefit from the significant progress that other projects are able to pull off that you haven't had the time to yet. Right. I would love to see some of that rocking out. That would be just totally killer. Jeremy, we're going to cut it off right here. We're all done. Okay. We literally just hit the 1 hour mark, which very few of my episodes do. This is like most of the last 6 episodes have been roughly a half hour, and I have been getting garbage from people about the Lunduke half-hour show. And so now this is an hour-long show, more than that.
Yeah, so take that.
Take that, internet YouTube commenters, who are also my
They're the best.
And
They're the best.
Fans who I just made fun of, and I also made fun of every.
Are the best. Java is cool.
Programming
there
languages.
There are no
I
problems
love Java developers and C developers. Oh, I love them
I love the
very
developers.
much. The thing is, though,
come to Rust, please.
Quick Basic is a much better language. I'm just saying.